And we are joined now by Mya Frazier, investigative journalist based in Ohio, fellow at the Watchdog Writers Group at the University of Missouri School of Journalism, whose latest piece in Harper's is entitled The Eviction Experts. Mya, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for your interest.
So your piece starts off in 2021 at a meeting for the Columbus Apartment Association, this landlord lobbying group in Ohio. And this is in the immediate aftermath of the COVID eviction moratorium expiring. What did you see at this meeting, this kind of conference that you went to, which when I was reading your piece in Harper's, it gave me kind of chills down my spine about how corporatized and how automated, honestly, this process of evicting people from their homes is beginning to become.
Yeah, I had started spending some time at my local eviction court during the pandemic from some previous stories I'd been working on. And I started getting interested in this one law firm who filed the most evictions in court and was trying to understand sort of the power dynamics within my local eviction court. And someone mentioned, the main managing partner of this law firm that files the most evictions in Columbus mentioned he was, headed to promote their services at this conference. And so, I headed out there that day and was really kind of intrigued by what I found, because it was a lot of these booths that you would think at an apartment association, there were the normal booths for cleaning up, apartments that were messed up or landscaping and so on. But there was also just this very all these tech booths. It was almost kind of like a bunch of startups and promoting a lot of services that would allow landlords to not even be directly involved in managing their properties. And so that was very intriguing, just the rise of prop tech, which is this industry that is just during that time frame was getting billions of dollars in investment.
Yeah, you have a sentence here that I thought summed it up quite nicely. Two converging trends, the automation of property management and Wall Street's consolidation of America's rental housing stock, had exacerbated the already uneven power dynamics of the landlord-tenant relationship. And that the symbolism of what you saw in that particular meeting or conference seems to represent that. If you could just speak to those two trends in particular and what you witnessed and what you wrote about, both the automation of property management, as you touched on there, and Wall Street's involvement as well.
Certainly. Sorry, now my iMessage is going. Certainly.
We don't hear it, don't worry.
The interesting thing that I saw was that I was watching what was going on in eviction court. I was watching the efficiencies that this local law firm had there and trying to understand how is that possible. And so in understanding the growth of property management, you saw how they were able to prepare all the documents, all the information that was necessary to start an eviction. So there is almost like a triggering mechanism that's possible now within property management, within these software systems where there's just certain conditions they're able to put on the inflows of rent, the late fees, what would trigger an eviction, and just the ease with which they're able to then port that information to a landlord attorney and proceed with the eviction process.
It's almost like artificial intelligence, AI, to a degree, of who meets this criteria for eviction, and then they work kind of hand in hand with legal representatives. You highlight this powerful law firm, Willis Law, and their bundling of these eviction cases for the courts in Columbus in particular. What did that look like? This law firm that seemingly has made a bit of a specialty in representing these landlords in eviction cases in Ohio.
Yeah, so the issue with eviction court, depending on where you are, is whether or not you need a representative in court to proceed with an eviction. And you used to not have to have that in Columbus. There was a practice known as sort of eviction by affidavit, where this law firm would take affidavits from the property manager and proceed forward with the evictions. And it can be time consuming. Like for a landlord to deal with an eviction, to have to go to court is time consuming. Now, there was a legal fight where that practice was outlawed, but it didn't do much to stop this sort of batching of evictions on the docket. So the sort of brilliance of their business model, Willis Law, is they're able to go to their clients and say, we're very efficient. You don't have to give up the labor time of sending your property manager to be there all day or to go on multiple days. They're able to go, say, on one day and deal with, 20, 30 evictions at one time, which I witnessed quite frequently. I spent a lot of time there, and, certain cases would be called up for a very specific property, and they would just be taken care of very, very quickly. So, and out of the dockets, which often ran over 100 a day, Willis would dominate that. They would have the vast majority of those cases on an ongoing basis. And although I never was able to figure out how much they were making on each of those evictions, it's, plainly a very, very profitable practice to batch and evict quite frequently for landlords at that level of efficiency.
And Columbus in particular was a hotbed of evictions. I hadn't realized how frequent evictions were in Columbus until obviously I read your piece.
Yeah.
But so I guess if you could just speak to how frequent they've become and what the pandemic looked like within that context.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's fascinating is the city has really taken up the issue of evictions since about 2016. When Evicted by Matthew Desmond was published, it was read quite widely among the city's elite, and there was a commission that was formed by the mayor. He appointed his wife to head it up, and there was a concerted effort to recognize the city had a problem. Columbus has had tremendous growth compared to other cities in Ohio, and we've had just skyrocketing rents. I live here, so it's something I've experienced and witnessed. And you would think that might have put a dent in the filings. And what's a little disturbing and concerning, quite frankly, for a Midwest city that had, for decades been quite affordable, is despite valiant efforts by the city, by the legal aid community, is seeing more evictions than they ever had. And also during this time frame, during the pandemic, during a phase when about $130 million in rental assistance was funneled, through this court, and essentially, it depending on your advantage or how you think about such things, like enriching landlords through that process, during a time of, economic upheaval, when, the risk of having properties during, times of crises, things went on as normal, and they had some of their best years ever during the pandemic. Rents were at their highest rate. Occupancy rates were really high. Yet the thing that I found from just spending time and embedding myself at eviction court is the evictions kept happening. There was sort of this I think, a sense that the moratoriums stopped evictions, but they didn't. I mean, thousands of people were still evicted, and you know, despite 100 and in this small area on the national level, it was about $46 billion, but they really did not stop for any length of time.
So the millions poured into the landlords, and they seemed quite content. But evictions, even though there was a moratorium, that didn't curb, or did it curb slightly during some period of time? Either way, though, the tenants didn't, outside of the payments that came from the federal government, the one under Trump, and then when right after Biden got elected, there really was no. It was very asymmetrical what tenants received in terms of protections versus the millions that were flowing into the coffers of landlords.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that was most on a very detailed level is this money was flowing in, the crisis was unfolding, yet the late fees and the court fees were still tacked on
Uh,
to each of these cases. And so there was really no give in the system. The landlords were being made whole, and the tenants, in some cases, I mean, to be accurate, I did see, and this was unusual during, the big infusions of that money, some tenants did get, $8,000 in rent arrears paid off, and they were saved from evictions. But often there was, $1,000 in late fees tacked onto that the
mm.
landlord was able to, profit from, because in a lot of cases, these were very egregious late fees, within the local context that I saw. So yeah, I mean, I think the issue that I found so fascinating in working on this is there really was just a really big disconnect between landlords are going to be made whole, but there were going to be no conditions on how they treated tenants throughout this process. And very little restrictions on no restrictions on rent increases or late fees.